What would the 2024 Formula 1 season look like if the Red Bull drivers Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc were not there? By the way, happy Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate, happy holiday season, happy new year when it comes, hope you're having a good holiday season. And if you're sitting there wondering, well, why'd you take out Checo as well? Well, you could have just taken out the top three, it's better without Checo, believe me. At round one, George Russell takes the opening pole position of the year, but Carlos Sainz comes on stronger in the race and he wins the opening race of the season for the Ferrari, the sole Ferrari driver there is on the grid. Well, he gets the better of George, who ends up slipping back to second place, leading home a Mercedes 2-3 to start things off, because Lewis Hamilton ends up taking third place in this first race. But Carlos won't be having the same fortunes at round 2 in Saudi Arabia because his appendix says no. So while he's out, Ferrari get Ollie Behrman in to replace him, and he has a really good weekend, a very impressive 4th place finish for the young Brit on his Formula 1 debut, but it's just as good if not better for Oscar Piastri, who wins the Grand Prix from pole position for his first ever pole position in Formula 1 and first ever race victory as well. And he's leading home Fernando Alonso, taking second place. He was 5th place last time, he's second today, and George Russell is making it 2 consecutive podiums in a row. Round 3 in Australia, not much is different. The only thing that's different is Carlos Sainz's pole, and Carlos Sainz sets the fastest lap. Everything else is the same because Max Verstappen retired from this race. Or well, everything's the same in terms of the race win, rather. It's not a Ferrari 1-2, it's a Sainz Piastri 1-2, because Piastri finishes in second, and Lance Stroll makes it Aston Martin getting 2 podiums in a row. So Sainz is 2 out of 3 in terms of race wins as we head on over to the Japanese Grand Prix, where he will be out to try and make it 3 out of 4, and also 2 out of 4 in terms of pole positions. He succeeds in that, he takes pole, he sets the fastest lap in the race again, and he does indeed get the race victory. A brilliant start to the season for him, as with Fernando Alonso and George Russell rounding out the podium for the same 2-3s of Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. And at China for round 4, we come to the first sprint weekend of the year. And it's all smiles for Lewis Hamilton in the sprint race. In the Grand Prix format, he's only been able to take 1 podium so far this year. He's in 2 5th places as well as retirement. He's winning the sprint race today, which is a brilliant way to start off his race weekend. He's leading home in the sprint, Carlos Sainz and Oscar Piastri for 2nd and 3rd. And then when we turn to the Grand Prix format, it's once again Carlos Sainz coming out on top for a race victory from pole position ahead of George Russell, who's 4 podiums out of 5 races so far. He's had a brilliant start to the season, and so is Fernando Alonso, who's setting the fastest lap and finishing in 3rd place. From Asia, it's off to America before we head on over to Europe for the Miami Grand Prix and the 2nd sprint race of the year, where Daniel Ricciardo has a brilliant sprint race. He's a brilliant qualifying, which puts him in a position to be able to win the sprint race for V-Carb, Red Bull Light as I like to call them. He manages to hold off Carlos Sainz throughout the sprint race to win it, with Sainz in 2nd place and Oscar Piastri once again settling for 3rd. And in the Grand Prix, those two would end up coming to blows a bit. Sainz starts from pole position, and after the mid-race safety car for the incident that took place, then things get a little bit testy between Sainz and Piastri, as they did in real life, and it ends up that Piastri ends up finishing back in 9th place, but with the fastest lap as well, while Sainz gets another race victory with the fastest lap. To be honest, that would probably make it hurt a little bit more for Oscar, but whatever. Sainz wins for the 5th time in 6 races, and as we look to the standings, that puts him in a brilliant position with a massive lead. 142 points is his lead currently, with Oscar Piastri sitting in 2nd place on 93 points. It's a 10-point gap back to George Russell and Fernando Alonso, who are rounding out the top 4, with the top 5 being signed off by Lewis Hamilton on 72 points. Nico Hülkenberg is in P6 on 41 points, with a 1-point gap back to Tsunoda on 40 points, while 8th place is Lance Stroll, 9th place is Kevin Magnussen, and 10th place is Esteban Ocon. For the constructors, things are close at the moment, as Mercedes have 155 points on the board in 1st place, and they don't have much back to Ferrari. 9 points, they're on 146, but that is soon going to change. You can almost guarantee it. 3rd place currently is Aston Martin on 110 points, while 4th is McLaren, and then 5th is presently Haas on 60 points. V-Carb are 6 points further back and on 54 points, followed by Alpine on 26, Williams on 17, and Sauber on 15. They've actually scored a lot of points. Zhou Guanyu's had a very good start to his season. And of course, the graph is making a comeback, the line graph. I've got the 2 Mercedes drivers on there as well as Piastri and Sainz. I don't have Fernando Alonso on there, even though he's currently tied with Russell. I just don't have him on there. But it's quite quite close at the moment, except for Sainz, who's got quite a good lead at the moment after his phenomenal start to the season. So let's see how that works itself all out as we move on to round 7, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri goes quickest in qualifying, but due to a grid drop, he ends up having to hand the pole position over to Carlos Sainz, who will be delighted to defaultly starting P1. However, Piastri ends up getting the better of him and spoiling the Ferrari party by winning for the second time this season ahead of Sainz, who's gonna have to settle for second place, and Lewis Hamilton, future Ferrari driver, ends the podium up in P3. And from Italy, it's off to Monaco for the tightest race on the calendar, the tightest track on the calendar rather, the track where qualifying is absolutely everything. Piastri will be happy after his win last time out, and it bodes well for him. He continues the momentum as he wins the Monaco Grand Prix from pole position. Wasn't likely to be overtaken. Of course, there would have been no early red flag probably because there's no Checo, but Piastri would have been starting on P1 and he would have been fine probably still. There is of course a thing that with that early collision between him and Sainz, I'm not entirely convinced that would have still happened because they're starting in this is the one time where I am taking starting in different positions into account. Because of course Sainz would have been going into turn 1 on the other side of Piastri. I just don't think the collision between them would have happened. So I'm putting Sainz in second with P3 going the way of George Russell. And at the Canadian Grand Prix, George Russell takes that podium momentum and it turns into a brilliant weekend for him. He nabbed pole position in qualifying his second pole of the season, but this time he holds on to the P1 spot because he wins the Canadian Grand Prix. The Mercedes won too actually, as Hamilton's in second place with the fastest lap for an additional point for them, the Constructors' Championship. But P3 is heading the way of Oscar Piastri, who's getting to big points on Carlos Sainz as Carlos was retires from this race. So it's all smiles for Oscar Piastri in terms of him trying to fight Sainz. Of course, well, gain on him rather. Hamilton and Russell are thereabouts as well. The Mercedes are on a bit of a run right now because of the next round in Spain. Lewis Hamilton has one of those Lewis Hamilton weekends. You know what I'm on about. The weekend where he's absolutely incredible. This is another one at a track where he tends to be incredible. It's a hat trick for him. Pole position, fastest lap, and race victory ahead of George Russell for another Mercedes 1-2, and Carlos Sainz runs off the podium for a podium at his home race. That'll absolutely delight the Spanish fans. Round 11 in Austria is our second sprint weekend of the season, which sees Oscar Piastri taking a first sprint race win of the season, his second overall after winning the sprint race in Qatar last year. He's winning ahead of George Russell in second and Carlos Sainz in third place, and those three end up being the fight for the win on Sunday's race, which sees George Russell starting from pole position for the second time in 3 races, and he's winning for the second time in 3 races. No collision between Norris and Verstappen because they're not here. So it's the same podium as reality, actually. Not much has changed there in terms of the podium. It's still Piastri in second, it's still Sainz in third, and we can still now move on to the British Grand Prix, which is once again a George Russell pole position as it was in real life, and of course we all know how this race ended. It ended with Lewis Hamilton ending his winless drought. Of course, there's not a winless drought here because he won the Spanish Grand Prix, but it's Lewis Hamilton getting a victory at the British Grand Prix. But Piastri is once again in second place, and it's once again Carlos Sainz finishing up in third place for the same 2-3 as last time, as Sainz is making a bit of a habit of being on the podium. The only race he hasn't been on the podium in is Canada, where he retired, and in Saudi Arabia, where he wasn't racing. If he finishes, he's on the podium in this season, and that's going to bode him well in the championship, as he still is leading the way on 230 points to Oscar Piastri, 26 points behind him on 204. Piastri was actually just tied with Russell on points. Russell is currently in third though on 186 points. No, he isn't in third, he's in fourth actually, because he's 1 point behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who's on 187 points. So very, very close between the two Mercedes drivers. It's not close to Fernando Alonso though. He's in 5th place on 111 points. He's kind of on his own. Nico Hülkenberg's in 6th meanwhile on 77 points, while 62 points is going the way of Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll. They are tie on points at the moment in 6th and in 7th and 8th, sorry. While 9th is also a tie between Pierre Gasly and Kevin Magnussen, both on 37 points. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes have a massive lead. They're on 373 points to Ferrari on 234. 30 points ahead of McLaren, meanwhile in third on 204. Aston Martin are on 173 points in 5th place, while 6th place is Red Bull Light on 94 points, to Alpine in 7th on 70 points, and then is finally Williams still in 8th, on 33 points, and then Sauber in 18th. On 18 points. I cannot speak today, honestly. You can see there on the graph how close it is between the two Mercedes drivers, and Piastri closing up to Carlos Sainz. He's closing there in the battle for the championship. It's off to the final final doubleheader before the summer break, now with the Hungarian Grand Prix. This is the race weekend that saw Oscar Piastri take his actual first race victory in Formula 1, and of course he still wins it here. This is a hell of a lot less controversy with McLaren, because there's no teammate for Piastri to be needed to be let by from, if that's English, I think. But he wins it from pole position with Lewis Hamilton, man, who's always gone very, very well around the Hungaroring, taking second place. He goes well around it again today, and Carlos Sainz is taking a third place finish in a row. Belgium is up next for the final race before the summer break, and it's a Lewis Hamilton pole position that turns into second place behind his teammate George Russell, who goes on the rather bold one-stop strategy, and it works out for him until he gets disqualified, which hands the race victory to his teammate Lewis Hamilton for a second win in 3 races, and promotes Piastri up to second place from third and Carlos from fourth to third. And as we take a quick pause of the summer break, just gonna throw it out there, if you're enjoying this series, this video, subscribe for more content. I have a whole bunch of other ones of this series. Here is the list as ever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Drop a like if you're enjoying the video, it really helps out. Now let's get back into it, and we head off to the Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix, Logan Sargent's last race in Formula 1. And it's a race that sees Oscar Piastri taking pole position. It sees Oscar Piastri winning the Grand Prix. This is going to be very, very good for his battle against Carlos Sainz in the Drivers' Championship. As him winning the Grand Prix and Sainz having to settle for second place, that's going to be brilliant for Piastri to get some points back on him. And George Russell is bouncing back from his retirement, disqualification, with a third place finish. And as we head on to Monza, then Piastri is going to be looking to spoil the Ferrari party and have a strong weekend and prevent Carlos Sainz from getting a home victory for Ferrari. And he does just that. He takes pole position, and after a brilliant drive, he wins the Italian Grand Prix. And Carlos Sainz, as much as he would have liked to win, he has to settle for second place. But that win for Piastri and second place for Carlos Sainz means that there is now only 1 point separating them in the Drivers' Championship battle. It's gotten very, very close between them, and it's remaining close between the two Mercedes drivers as they finish third and fourth. Third for Hamilton and fourth for Russell. Piastri's on a bit of a run though, and at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, he'll be looking to continue that with a third consecutive pole position, his fourth in the last, 5 races, and it's his fourth win in the last 5 races, as is yet another race victory for him. He won this race in real life. He wins it again here, but it's not Leclerc's Ferrari in second because he ain't here. It's Sainz's Ferrari because he doesn't crash with Perez because Perez ain't here to crash with. So Sainz is in second place, and third place is still George Russell. He finished third in real life. It's off to Singapore now for the final race before we head back over to North and South America and then to the Middle East. And Mercedes are not that far away from the Constructors' Championship, so they'll be looking to have a really strong weekend to try and get that or get even very close to it. And they start off brilliantly with Lewis Hamilton taking pole position, but in the Grand Prix, things don't work out quite right for him, and it works out perfectly for Oscar Piastri. McLaren very strong this weekend. Piastri continues that. It's a 4th consecutive race victory. He's just had a similar run to what Sainz had at the beginning of the year in winning 5 or 6 races, while it's a Mercedes 2-3 with Russell in second and Hamilton from pole slipping back to third place, and Sainz finishing 4th. So Piastri getting some really good points over Carlos Sainz as he took the championship lead with his win last time out of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He now leads it by 21 points, 347 points for Piastri to 326 for Carlos Sainz. So it's about 21 points between them. The pendulum has swung. The momentum has changed from Sainz over to Piastri, while the battle between the Mercedes drivers rages on, with Lewis Hamilton on 280 points and Russell on 260. 20 points separating them. Fernando Alonso in 5th, meanwhile, is still in a world of his own. And Nico Hülkenberg is still in a world of his own, kind of, in 6th place on 95 points. 7th place is Lance Stroll on 81 points, while 8th place is still Yuki Tsunoda on 76 points, and then it's Alex Albon on 54 points in 9th. Meanwhile, 10th place is a tie, actually 10th and 11th, between Pierre Gasly and Daniel Ricciardo. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes are on 540 points, the McLaren on 347, Ferrari on 330, and then Aston Martin on 246 points. They have a 294 point gap back to Aston Martin, with 309 points left after the Singapore Grand Prix for a team to score, because that only applies to Aston Martin, not McLaren and Ferrari. They only have 1 driver. So basically, Mercedes are very close to the Constructors' Championship, with 250 points left maximum that Aston Martin can score after the US Grand Prix, 146 for Ferrari and McLaren. As long as Mercedes don't screw up, they'll win the Constructors in Austin. That's 1 through 4. 5th place is still Haas on 145 points. However, VCarb are closing in. They're on 126 points. They've kind of left Alpine for dust a little bit. They're on 96 points, while Williams are still in 8th on 77, and and it's still sad we're still on 18 points in 9th. But you can see how close things are between the two for the championship. And meanwhile, between Sainz and Piastri, the things have kind of swung in Piastri's favour after Sainz had that very strong start to the season. Piastri's just had a similar very strong run, and things are also close between the Mercedes drivers, who, yes, they're still here, even though they're not really in the championship fight anymore. I'm keeping them on here because it's a close fight between them. At the US Grand Prix, it is a perfect weekend for Carlos Sainz. The only thing he misses out on is the fastest lap, which gets taken by Esteban Ocon. Sprint race victory ahead of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, and race victory ahead of Oscar Piastri and, once again, George Russell. But while Carlos Sainz has taken the win, Mercedes' third place finish in the Grand Prix with George Russell, plus his second place in the sprint and Lewis's third place in the sprint. That's enough for them to seal up the Constructors' Championship with, what, 5 races to spare in the season? 7 if you include the sprint races? They dominated the Constructors this year, honestly. But they haven't dominated the Drivers' Championship. That's between Piastri and Sainz. Sainz has just had a very good weekend. Exactly what he would have been looking for to try and get back at Piastri in the championship fight. As like I said, that is currently very, very close. And he continues this strong run at the Mexican Grand Prix, a race that he won from pole position in real life. He still wins it from pole position here, outscoring Piastri by 15 points as he only finishes in 5th place, with the 2 Mercedes of Hamilton and Russell rounding out the podium. So it's swings and roundabouts toward it one way in this Drivers' Championship fight. Because right when Piastri gets on form, things swing in his direction. It swings back to Carlos Sainz for 2 wins in a row, 3 if you count the sprint race. And as we head to Brazil, he'll be looking to continue that strong form. And in the sprint race, our penultimate sprint weekend of the season, it kind of continues. He finishes in 2nd place behind Piastri, so only losing 1 point to him, while George Russell ending up in 3rd place in the sprint. But in what is a very wet and chaotic Grand Prix, it ends up being a retirement for Sainz as he crashes out. So Piastri goes on to take 5th place with the fastest lap, but with the race win ended up going the way of Esteban Ocon, for an Alpine 1-2 with Gasly in 2nd place. Alpine getting the best of the conditions and actually getting a very, very good result. Well, it's once again George Russell in 3rd place, because of course it is. So with Piastri retaking the championship lead, he'll looking to build on it in Las Vegas, which sees basic domination by George Russell. He takes pole position and then just buggers off with P1 in the Grand Prix to win, while Lewis Hamilton ends up storming back from starting a bit further down to ending up finishing in 2nd place with the fastest lap as well. Not the Mercedes need the points, they've already won the bloody Constructors' Championship. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz finishes in 3rd place, ahead of Piastri in 4th, so closing a few points back to the Australian driver. And he'll be looking to further close it and pass him at the Qatar Grand Prix for the penultimate race weekend of the season, which can see the Drivers' Championship decided. Of course, with 26 points left to decide after this race weekend. Piastri can win the championship this weekend, but given it's only a 3-point gap between them, it would take a lot. It's our final sprint weekend of the season though, and he takes the sprint race victory ahead of George Russell in 2nd and Carlos Sainz in 3rd, so that brings a 3-point gap up to a 5-point gap that Sainz will be hoping won't go any bigger in the Grand Prix. However, in a Grand Prix which sees him get a puncture, which sees Hamilton get a puncture, he ends up finishing in 4th place, not being able to get past Pierre Gasly, who ends up taking a very strong 3rd place finish for his 2nd podium in the last 3 races. 2nd place goes the way of the pole man George Russell, but the race victory and the fastest lap get taken by Oscar Piastri, and even though he's outscored Carlos Sainz quite a bit this race, it's not quite enough for the championship, as there is currently a 19-point gap between them for the Drivers' Championship fight. It's the last race decider then. It's very much one hand on the trophy for Piastri, but Sainz could still come back at him because anything can happen in the final round of the season. In the battle between the Mercedes drivers, it's basically sorted. There's a 30-point gap between them. Russell on 368 points, Will Hamilton on 338. They're in 3rd and 4th. They're sorted, as is Fernando Alonso on 180 points in 5th place. He's been basically alone for most of this season. Nico Hülkenberg is also unchallenged in 6th place, as he is on 133 points. It's very, very close though between the former teammates Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda, who of course scored his first podium in Formula 1 earlier this season that I totally didn't forget to mention until just now. Sorry, Yuki. But there's just 1 point between them. It's all that's there. Gasly's been on a strong run of form. Tsunoda's had strong runs of form in this season as well. Love to see who comes out there on top there in the battle for 7th and 8th place. Meanwhile, 9th and 10th is currently Lance Stroll and Kevin Magnussen. 4 points separating them. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. In the Constructors, it's already decided several races ago with Mercedes on 706 points. 2nd place is still for grabs between McLaren and Ferrari. Almost the same point gap, as a slightly different different point gap between them thanks to the points from Behrman earlier in the year. But Ferrari can still get second there. It's the same basically as the Drivers' Championship. Aston Martin, meanwhile, they're fine. They've got a good enough gap back to Alpine to be secure in 4th place. Haas, sorry, who are secure in 5th place. But things are very close between Alpine and VCarb. 1 point between them in the constructors as well. So 173 to 172. Meanwhile, Williams and Sauber are still Williams and Sauber in 8th and 9th on 93 and 34. So as we head on into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix with Carlos Sainz basically needing to win the race with Piastri finishing 8th or lower or something like that, we can head into the championship deciding Grand Prix, which sees Oscar Piastri claiming pole position to start with, so that's a best ever starting position for him. Now, of course, in real life, he got spun at turn 1 by Max Verstappen. However, he's not here. So with Piastri not getting spun around at turn 1, I think with the McLaren having pretty good pace in Abu Dhabi, Sainz had very good pace, but I just think Piastri would have been able to hold on for the race victory. And even if even if Sainz and Piastri finished the other way around, to Sainz in first and Piastri second, it would not matter, because no matter which order they finish in, I'm saying Piastri first and Sainz second, it is Piastri coming out on top in the big picture for the largest trophy at the end of the year. Oscar Piastri is your world champion. In only his 2nd season, he is the first Australian world champion since, I want to say, Alan Jones in 1980. Was he Australian? I think he was Australian. Anyway, trying to recount previous champions aside, Oscar Piastri is your world champion. Carlos Sainz gonna have to settle for 2nd place, while the podium today is rounded off by Lewis Hamilton coming back from further down the grid in his final race for Mercedes. In the Gasly-Tsunoda battle, then with Tsunoda taking only 9th place, Pierre Gasly claiming 5th place is enough for him to come out on top in that battle, while with neither Stroll or Magnussen scoring, that battle remains the same. And well, with Alpine scoring more points today than what VCarb did, then it is obviously Alpine coming out on top there. Here is your final Drivers' Championship standings then. Oscar Piastri is your champion on 468 points to Carlos Sainz on 442 in 2nd place. He came so close, yet so far. George Russell wins out in the battle of the Mercedes drivers in 3rd place on 380 points, while Lewis Hamilton, in his final season with the team, is on 353 points. Fernando Alonso has been pretty much left alone all season, except for when he was very close at the front at the start of the season with George Russell. He's on 186 points to Nico Hülkenberg in 6th on 141. Pierre Gasly's on 111 points in 7th, beating out his former teammate Yuki Tsunoda on 102 points in 8th place, with the top 10 rounded out by Lance Stroll on 85 points and then Kevin Magnussen on 81 points in P10. Esteban Ocon, who got booted 1 race early, is the first driver outside the top 10 on 72 points, and Alex Albon in 12th place is on 61 points. 50 points go the way Daniel Ricciardo, who got a very rubbish send-off in Singapore. Colapinto, who I forgot to mention entirely, he had some very strong results. He's in 14th place on 31 points. And Zhou Guanyu, who scored a lot of points for Sauber, he scored 26 points to finish in 15th place ahead of Liam Lawson, who I also totally forgot to mention. He's on 22 points in 16th place. He came in as of the US Grand Prix. He did a pretty damn good job actually for a few races. And he's beating out another driver who was only in for a few races, Ollie Behrman, scoring 12 points in 17th place, while Valtteri Bottas actually scored some points in this season in 18th on 9 points, and Logan Sargent, who got binned early, scored 5 points, and Jack Doohan, who came in for the last race, scored nothing. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes dominated proceedings on 733 points, the McLaren finishing 2nd on 468 points, while Ferrari were in 3rd on 446. Aston Martin finished 4th on 271 points to Haas in 5th on 230 points. Alpine win out in the battle for 6th place on 183 points to VCarb on 174 points, while Williams are still in 8th place on 97 points, as Sauber are last in 9th on 35 points. Here's your final graph as well, with the entire top 10 on there. You can see the way that the P5 and down were kind of just left for dead by the top 4, the close battle of the Mercedes, the close battle for the championship. And here's a graph for the constructors as well. I didn't do one for the whole video, but it's here now. Here's your end of season stats then. To end things off, Oscar Piastri had the most race wins this season, the champion with the most wins. He won 10 races this season to Carlos Sainz winning 7, while Russell scored 3, Hamilton scored 3, and Ocon scored 1. For podium sisters, Constructors, it was Carlos Sainz with the most podiums this season, scoring 19 podiums. In fact, every single time he finished a Grand Prix, it was in the top 4. Anytime he finished a race, actually, including sprints, it was in the top 4. Very, very consistent this season in this universe. Oscar Piastri, meanwhile, scored 16 podiums, also very, very consistent this season. All but one of his races was a top 5 finish, which is crazy. But George Russell also had 16 podiums, he was very consistent. Lewis Hamilton had 13 podiums too, Alonso having 3, Gasly having 2, and Stroll, Ocon, and Tsunoda all having 1 podium. For pole positions, it was a tie for most poles between Piastri, Sainz, and Russell, 7 each, and meanwhile Hamilton scored the other 3 pole positions. For fastest laps, Lewis Hamilton was the man who was the fastest over 1 lap in a Grand Prix, the most consistent. He scored 7 fastest laps, to Piastri with 4, Sainz with 3, Russell with 3, Fernando with 3, and then Ocon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and Lawson all with 1. And finally, sprint wins, I may as well mention it. Piastri scored the most sprint wins with 3, Sainz scored 1, Hamilton scored 1, and Ricciardo scored 1. And with that, 2024 without the Red Bull drivers Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc is at its end. Piastri comes out on top, Mercedes come out on top, and I hope you guys see what I mean when I say it's better without PEREZ. I mean, you don't include PEREZ, and then you have Sainz having that strong run in the middle of the year that kind of combats Piastri's strong run at the end of the year, means it's still a very close fight at the end. It was just better without PEREZ as well, okay? Anyway, I'm gonna leave this one here. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.